The sound of forks clinking against plates filled the unsettling silence over our Wednesday night dinner. I stared across the table at Rowan, my husband of 6 years, searching his face for any sign of the loving man I had married. But his eyes avoided mine as he hastily shoveled pasta into his mouth. My gaze drifted to his phone lying next to his plate. A notification blinked provocatively as if daring me to unlock it. Against my better judgment, I gave in to temptation. Rowan didn't notice as I leaned over and entered the unlock code. His acting skills had become that convincing. The message glared at me like a blatant accusation. Can't wait to feel you inside me again. Meet at our place in an hour. The sender's name was Marcel. I reread it, my heart pounding as the words etched into my mind like shards of broken glass. So this was why he had been distant lately, coming home late without explanation, his mind always elsewhere, consumed by whatever sordid thoughts preoccupied him. "Everything okay, honey?" Rowan asked, snapping me out of my trance with that perfectly innocent tone he had perfected over who knows how long. I slid his phone across the table, speechless. His eyes widened as his mask finally slipped, allowing a flash of panic to cross his face. At that moment, I realized the man I thought I knew had been a mirage. "Ara, I can explain," he began, but I cut him off with a raised hand. "Don't bother," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of heartbreak and rage. "Just tell me one thing. How long has this been going on?" Rowan opened his mouth, then closed it again, his shoulders slumped in defeat. 6 months, he finally confessed. The words hit me like a blow. 6 months. Half a year of lies and deceit while I blissfully continued tending to our home and planning a future with a man who had already checked out of our marriage. "Who is she?" I demanded, though I already knew the answer. "Marcella, the beautiful 20-something interior designer, one that worked on a project in Rowan's office." He let out a bitter laugh. "Does it matter? She's someone who made me feel things I haven't felt in years." His words slashed at what little remained of my heart. I wanted to collapse in anguish, to scream until my throat was raw, but I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me so utterly broken. Summoning every ounce of strength, I rose from my chair and headed for the door, grabbing my purse with me. "Where are you going?" he called after me, the first hint of concern entering his voice. I turned to face him, my vision blurred with unshed tears. "I'm leaving," I declared, my voice firm and final. "And when I return, you'd better be gone because I don't even recognize you anymore." Yanking the door open, I stormed out into the night, each step away from my sham of marriage strengthening my resolve. I had been a fool to believe in the perfect life we had built together, but that illusion had finally shattered, irreparably broken. I spent a sleepless night at a hotel, tears streaming down my face as the full weight of Rowan's betrayal crushed me. How could the man I loved, who vowed to cherish me, so callously discard our marriage? The next morning, blinded by hurt but determined to take action, I contacted a private investigator recommended by a friend who had gone through a tough divorce. Within 24 hours, he had uncovered a sordid trail of evidence that left me shaking with rage and disgust. Rowan hadn't just been having a fling with that vapid interior designer Marcella. The investigator's report revealed multiple affairs spanning over a year, including emails, credit card statements, and dated photos of Rowan entering different hotels with various women. "I apologize, Mrs. Davies," the investigator said, as he laid out the damning dossier on my kitchen table. "Your husband has been quite prolific in his indiscretions." I clenched my jaw, fighting back waves of nausea. One name and face, in particular, emerged at me. Marcella, the woman whose taunting text had blown the lid off this whole pathetic affair. "I need to know everything about her," I told the investigator, my voice hardening with fury. "Where she lives, where she works, every single thing. 2 days later, he provided me with an address, a high-class apartment in an upscale part of town that was out of my league to afford. Rowan must have been stacking money to keep his mistress living in such luxury while I stayed home, oblivious. Consumed by a reckless impulse, I drove to Marcella's place. Letting myself into the lobby with the temporary code the investigator had acquired, I found her door unlocked. A perfect opportunity to confront the woman who had decimated my life. I stormed inside, greeted by a lavish interior that instantly confirmed my husband's lover didn't lack expensive tastes. "Hello," a silky voice called from another room. "Rowan, is that you?" I clenched my fists as a raven-haired seductress glided into view, covered in nothing but a silk robe that clung hungrily to her skin. Her eyes went wide when she saw me. "You!" I spat through gritted teeth. "You're the one who shattered my marriage." Rather than looking ashamed, she arched one perfectly groomed eyebrow as a mocking smirk played across her lips. "Well, if it isn't the famous Mrs. Davies, I was just wondering when you'd show up to get to know the woman your pathetic husband can't resist." White-hot rage engulfed me, and before I could stop myself, my hand lashed out, landing a sharp slap across her smug face. She gasped, recoiling in shock, and I felt a savage thrill at having wiped that smirk off her face. "You're gonna regret that," she hissed, one hand covering her rapidly reddening cheek. "Wait until Rowan knows about this." "Rowan will leave you for me, won't he?" I shot back, advancing on her until she backed into the wall. "Well, let me give you a reality check, you home-wrecking snake. He's broke. He's been spending our money on hotels, gifts, this expensive apartment, all to court a little gold-digging tramp like you." Revulsion flickered across her features before her mask of arrogance fell back into place. "We'll see," she sneered. "This isn't over, Mrs. Davies, not yet." I watched in disgust as she moved away, my desire for revenge burning hotter than ever before. "No," I thought bitterly as I stormed out. "This is just starting." After my explosive showdown with Marcella, I was seething, a volcano of pain and rage that threatened to erupt at any moment. I went back home, unable to think of anything but getting rid of that homewrecker's face from my mind. Rowan was already there, having moved his essentials into the guest bedroom at some point during my vengeful errand. His eyes went wide when he saw me storm through the front door. "Ara, what happened?" he asked, shocked by the thunderous expression on my face. I didn't bother responding with words. Instead, I flung the damning evidence provided by the private investigator across the room, letting the printed emails, photos, and financial statements spill to the floor. Rowan paled as he went through the incriminating documents, seemingly realizing the full depth of his sins for the first time. "You had multiple affairs," I stated, gritting my teeth. "For more than a year, it seems like, and that's not even the worst part." I held up a bunch of papers, containing the sums that Rowan had been funneling into a hidden account, no doubt to bankroll his luxurious affairs with his mistresses. "The money, Rowan!" I spat. "How could you steal from our accounts to wine and dine your scandalous women?" Instead of guilt, anger spread across his features. He drew himself up to his full height, fumes of anger radiating off him. "Don't you dare to use that virtuous tone with me," he shot back. "You're the one to blame for this, Ara. Our marriage has been a miserable, lifeless husk for years. Why are you blaming me for finally finding happiness elsewhere?" My jaw dropped at the unexpected outburst of my husband, my shock quickly hardening into fury. "What happiness?" I echoed in disbelief. "With that home-wrecking Marcella? She's not some pure, enlightened woman, Rowan. She's a manipulative little gold digger who's been bleeding you dry." For a moment, doubt crept across his expression, but his stubbornness got a hold of him. "That's enough," he said coldly. "I want a divorce, Ara. My lawyer already started the process. I'm done with your judgmental complaining and this miserable existence of a marriage." The blunt words pierced what little remained of my heart. I recoiled, feeling the room start to spin around me as the weight of my shattered world came crashing down. Through blurred vision, I could see Rowan gathering his belongings and storming out the door without a backward glance. Just like that, it was over. My dreams, my life as I knew it, were obliterated in one fell swoop by the man who once vowed to love and cherish me until death did us part. Some vow. Crumpling to the floor amidst the scattered remnants of my marriage, I finally surrendered to the urge to scream, an anguished wail that cleaved through the shell of numbness enveloping me. I screamed until my throat was raw, purging my soul of the trauma that had been inflicted upon it. As my howls subsided, an uncharacteristic sense of clarity settled over me. Through my blurred gaze, I noticed a familiar rectangular shape peeking out from one of the folders. The deed to our family home bearing my name and mine alone. During my father's estate planning years ago, he had insisted on putting the house solely in my ownership, just in case. At the time, I thought his distrust of Rowan was merely a symptom of his sour nature. But now, as the first embers of vengeance kindled in my chest, I gave silent thanks for my father's foresight. I wouldn't be left with nothing after this devastation. No, with the deed secured in my hands, I would strike back and rebuild from the ashes Rowan had strewn around me. If he wanted war, so be it. I was just getting started. The next few days went in a blur of anguish and fury. I spent many sleepless nights poring over the file compiled by the private investigator, my eyes burning from the effort of holding back tears. But those tears wouldn't solve anything. Only decisive action would ensure I emerged from this nightmare with my pride and financial security intact. Armed with reams of evidence detailing Rowan's serial infidelity and financial misconduct, I marched into the office of Diane Hastings, one of the most tenacious divorce attorneys in the city. She was a shark in kitten heels, and I would need every ounce of her savagery. Diane flipped through the documents with a practiced eye, her polished veneer cracking just slightly as she absorbed the lurid details. "Good God," she muttered, removing her glasses to stare at me in disbelief. "I've seen some philandering dirtbags in my time, but your husband takes the cake." A small, humorless smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. "So, do we have a case?" Diane's eyes narrowed with determination. "Oh, we have more than a case. We're going to take him for everything he's got. By the time I'm done with him, he'll wish he had never set eyes on Marcella or any of the others." Over the next few weeks, Diane and I meticulously devised a strategy to dismantle Rowan's finances and ensure he was held accountable for his extensive indiscretions. Our plan involved freezing any hidden assets he'd accumulated to sustain his extravagant lifestyle and pursuing a substantial alimony settlement reflective of his betrayal and financial misconduct. "This Marcella woman is pivotal," Diane emphasized, tapping her pen against a photo of the deceitful homewrecker. "If we can prove she knowingly engaged in an affair with your husband for financial gain, we can go after her assets too. Trust me, that interior design job pays for a lot of enhancements." My heart raced at the thought of Marcella facing the same consequences Rowan was about to endure. Since our confrontational encounter at her apartment, she had vanished from public view, likely biding her time while relying on her lover's deep pockets to maintain her luxurious lifestyle. However, she was about to experience a rude awakening, just like her betrayed husband. During this time, Rowan had fallen ominously silent, likely stewing in denial while fantasizing about a fresh start with his now fiancée-turned-mistress. Little did he know, our once loving relationship was on the brink of transforming into a cutthroat legal battle that would leave him penniless and disgraced. The volcano finally erupted when Diane unleashed a barrage of legal documents at Rowan's rented apartment, a motion to freeze all his assets, backed by irrefutable evidence of his lavish spending on extramarital affairs. He had no choice but to face the music in court and confront the ruin he had wrought. The sheer horror etched on his face during our initial hearing almost made enduring his cruel betrayal worthwhile. His arrogant mistress was conspicuously absent, perhaps having finally realized the precariousness of her situation before I dismantled her means of support. Rowan's initial expression of disgrace quickly turned to outrage as Diane ruthlessly presented the comprehensive evidence of his deceitful double life. Bank records, hotel receipts, and other damning documentation revealing his infidelity. His lawyer could only stammer helplessly, overwhelmed by the devastating case we had meticulously prepared. "You're making a big mistake," Rowan snarled after the humiliating proceedings, flagging me down in the courthouse lobby. For a fleeting moment, the man I had once loved flickered in his eyes. "Ara, we can stop this. We can work things out. Start over." I regarded him with icy disdain as Diane looked on, ready to pounce if he dared to push further. "Did you honestly think I would just slink away and let you ride off into your pathetic second life?" I asked, reveling in the sting of my words. His eyes narrowed, anger seeping back into his expression. "This isn't you, Ara. You're not vindictive." I took a step closer, my voice low and steady. "You don't get to define who I am anymore, Rowan. You lost that right the moment you chose betrayal over loyalty." He opened his mouth to respond, but Diane stepped in between us. "I suggest you save your breath for your lawyer, Mr. Davies," she said, her tone icy. "You're going to need it." Rowan glared at Diane, then turned back to me. "This isn't over," he spat. In the aftermath of that explosive first hearing, the legal battle between Rowan and me descended into a swamp of vicious accusations. His lawyers hurled claims at me, fabricating evidence, alleging secret affairs with other men, as if trying to muddy the waters, all while conveniently overlooking his indiscretions paid for by him over our marriage. I braced against their attacks, focusing on the righteous fury fueling me every time I recalled his betrayal. Diane assured me these were desperate diversions to cloud the truth. "The evidence is solid," she affirmed with clinical certainty. "We just need one chink in his elaborate facade, and everything unravels." Fate seemed intent on providing that chink most unexpectedly. During a briefing with the private investigator about the latest legal maneuvers, he dropped a casual bombshell that made me freeze. "That Marcella woman certainly gets around, doesn't she?" His words hit me like a sledgehammer. My grip tightened around the phone. "What exactly do you mean?" "I've been digging deeper into her," he continued, "and it turns out she's not only with your soon-to-be ex. I've got proof she's also cozying up to an older, wealthier businessman on the side." White-hot indignation surged through me at the realization of Marcella's duplicity, playing the victim while manipulating multiple men. Her claims of innocence shattered like glass. In that instant, a cunning plan began to form in my mind, fueled by a mixture of rage and strategic clarity. "Continue investigating this other man," I instructed the investigator. "Find out everything. His identity, their meetings, every detail." A sly grin spread across his face. "You've got something big planned, Mrs. Davies?" I met his gaze with steely resolve. "Marcella needs to face the consequences of her actions. It's time she learned the repercussions of playing with fire." Over the next few weeks, Diane and I collaborated closely with the investigator to discreetly gather compelling evidence confirming Marcella's extramarital affairs. We secured surveillance photos showing her entering the opulent high-rise condo of business magnate Christopher Woodrow, a man in his 60s with a sprawling business empire and a meticulously maintained public image, notably underpinned by his marriage to an influential woman. "You know the saying," Diane remarked as we scrutinized the surveillance stills capturing Marcella and Mr. Woodrow in compromising positions. "Mistresses often assure their married lovers they'd never leave their spouse for them. learning that her husband's mistress has been playing the same game with other wealthy targets. Well, that might just push Mrs. Woodrow over the edge. I couldn't help but smile with vengeful anticipation. Marcella's self-righteous, holier-than-thou demeanor would soon be shattered once her rampant infidelities became public knowledge. If she believed she could manipulate the institution of marriage for her own gains, it was time for her world to implode as well. And Rowan? When the footage of his beloved fiancée engaging in dalliances with other affluent men surfaced, any lingering sympathy he harbored for her would evaporate. It would be the ultimate humiliation for a man who had forsaken his family for Marcella's empty promises of love. They were both perfect targets, consumed by greed, arrogance, and lust, now unwittingly awaiting the reckoning I meticulously prepared. After weeks of quietly amassing incriminating receipts, photographs, and phone records, everything was set for my retaliatory strike. I could barely contain my excitement as I dialed Diane's direct line. "It's time," I declared, my voice brimming with resolve. "Let's expose this entire deceitful facade for what it truly is." The annual Westbridge Charity Gala provided the perfect backdrop for my long-awaited retaliation. It was a luxurious affair attended by the city's elite, where Rowan and Marcella flaunted their newfound status as a glamorous power couple rising from the ashes of my shattered marriage. Little did they know, their carefully constructed facade was about to crumble before an audience of their peers. Diane and I arrived at the opulent Westbridge Hotel ballroom with a sense of purpose. As we surveyed the glittering crowd, I spotted Marcella clinging to Rowan like an expensive accessory, her figure-hugging scarlet dress drawing attention. "Stay focused," Diane whispered in my ear, her tone resolute. "It's time to make our move." Everything had been meticulously planned. While mingling with the affluent donors, I discreetly passed off the damning evidence, photos and videos capturing Marcella's indiscretions with her older tycoon lover, to Diane's assistant. Our strategy was set to unfold. Within moments, murmurs began to spread through the gala like wildfire. Guests exchanged shocked glances and hastily grabbed their smartphones as the scandalous images and footage of Marcella's liaisons with Christopher Woodrow went viral among the attendees. The news of the affair reverberated through the room, sparking a sensation akin to a spreading wildfire of scandalous gossip. Diane and I maintained a facade of innocence as the gala attendees gawked in stunned fascination. Yet, from the periphery of my vision, I caught Marcella's complexion draining of color as her gaze locked onto mine across the ballroom. Her painted lips contorted in fury, realizing who orchestrated her spectacular downfall. Bingo. Suddenly, a sleek ivory shoe entered my line of sight. Following its path up a sculpted leg, I reached the visage of Miranda Woodrow, Christopher's affluent and betrayed wife, radiating fury. "You deceitful little tramp," Miranda hissed, spittle flying as she seized Marcella by her meticulously styled hair. "Did you honestly believe you could keep humiliating me behind my back?" With a violent tug, Miranda spun Marcella around to face the crowd, ripping her dress open in a cascade of sequins and exposing her surgically enhanced assets to the gala's stunned audience. Marcella screamed as camera flashes illuminated the spectacle, her arms scrambling to shield herself. Scanning the room, I saw Rowan, slack-jawed, staring at his disgraced fiancée. Shock and self-pity mingled on his face as the realization dawned. Marcella had merely been exploiting him as another wealthy benefactor to fund her opulent lifestyle. The poetic justice of seeing them both publicly humiliated on this grand stage filled me with dark satisfaction. As Marcella broke free from Miranda's grasp and fled the ballroom in tears, Rowan turned to me with an empty, haunted stare. Across the sea of horrified guests, our eyes met, and I allowed my triumph to radiate through my expression. "You brought this upon yourself," I mouthed silently, letting the words hang in the air like the lingering scent of vindication. His jaw tightened as he offered a fleeting nod, an admission that my vengeance had indeed exacted its toll on our shattered lives. With that silent exchange, he pivoted and retreated from the gala, disappearing into the growing void in the crowd, leaving behind a trail of utter disgrace and ruin. I sipped my champagne, allowing the delicious moment to linger on my tongue as Diane materialized at my side. "Well, I do believe this evening has been a full and resounding success, right, Mrs. Davies?" she murmured with a proud smile. A grin stretched across my face as I remembered the catastrophic scene my revenge had wrought. "You don't know the half of it," I replied, "but I do think this is just the beginning of something beautiful." In the aftermath of the Westbridge Gala calamity, Rowan did what any disgraced, recently humbled man would do. He came slinking back crying, begging for mercy. I'll admit, seeing him out of his arrogant self provided a wicked sort of satisfaction. The pain I felt due to this drama was vanishing. Now, sitting across the table from me in Diane's office, he looked more like a kicked stray than my husband of 6 years. "Alara," he choked as I raised an eyebrow at him. I don't know what to say. I don't have words. What happened with Marcella? God, I was such a fool." Rowan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze flickering between my piercing stare and the stark reality of his misdeeds laid bare. The weight of my words hung heavy in the air, punctuated only by the soft hum of the air conditioning in Diane's office. For a moment, silence reigned, amplifying the tension between us. Rowan began, his voice faltering as he struggled to find the right words. "I know I messed up, Alara. I was weak, selfish. I took everything for granted." His admission hung between us, raw and unfiltered. It was the closest he had come to acknowledging the depth of his betrayal without excuses or deflections. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he continued, his tone tinged with desperation. "But I want to try to make amends somehow. I've been in therapy, trying to understand why I did what I did. I want to change, Alara. I need to change." I remained unmoved, my expression a mix of disbelief and simmering anger. The wounds he inflicted ran deep, cutting through trust and love like a relentless blade. Yet beneath my veneer of stoicism, a small voice whispered, a whisper of the man I once loved, the faint echo of our shared past before it shattered into irreparable fragments. "You had so many chances, Rowan," I finally replied, my voice quiet but unwavering. "And every time you chose betrayal. You don't get to undo that. Not now, not ever." Rowan's shoulders slumped, the weight of my words visibly crushing him. He nodded slowly, a defeated acceptance settling over him. For a moment, remorse flashed in his eyes, genuine and unguarded. "I understand," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll accept whatever you decide." With those words, the last flicker of hope extinguished. The man who once held my heart in his hands had gambled it away, leaving only shattered remnants in his wake. As Rowan rose to leave, his footsteps echoed with the weight of finality, closing the chapter on a tumultuous saga that had reshaped us both irreversibly. "I was destroyed when I saw you with Marcella," he stammered. "She was just using me like some pathetic meal ticket to bankroll her lifestyle. When that footage got out, I realized that I've been blind for so long, how I failed you just because lust got a hold of me." I gazed at him with a cold stare, refusing to let his carefully rehearsed expressions of regret soften my resolve, not after witnessing him heartlessly shatter my life in pursuit of fleeting pleasures. "Do you understand the pain?" I questioned, my voice barely above a whisper but thick with menace. "Of having the man I loved, the man I planned a future with, not only betray me but shame me in the worst possible manner. Repeatedly? To realize that you discarded me like some insignificant burden in favor of pursuing distasteful liaisons with interchangeable individuals. Rowan visibly wilted under the weight of his transgressions, his face contorting with self-loathing and regret. Good. He was finally experiencing the anguish he had callously inflicted upon me. I was monstrous, he confessed hollowly. Selfish and wretched. I didn't deserve your love, Alara. I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope I can somehow make amends, even if it means giving up every last penny. Anything to erase the despicable person I've become. Disgust churned within me as his pitiful pleas washed over me. Despite my temptation to revel in his agony, the idea of indulging his desire for redemption turned my stomach. I was no longer the impressionable, trusting woman he married. I would never allow him to manipulate me with false remorse again. Standing up, I met his gaze squarely and saw a flicker of hope that I might grant him the absolution he suddenly desired. That hope was swiftly extinguished by my next words. I don't want your money, Rowan. What I want is your absence from my life. He recoiled as though struck, his crestfallen expression transforming into one of utter shock. You mean, don't pretend, I interjected sharply, fighting the urge to wipe the betrayed look off his face. After everything you've done, all the boundaries you've crossed with your reckless affairs, did you honestly believe I'd be foolish enough to let you slither your way back into my life? But Alara, But nothing, I cut in, my voice seething as I leaned closer across the table, mere inches from his pitiful face. If you agree to these terms right now, right here, I'll make sure this divorce proceeds swiftly, and you can disappear into whatever dissolute second act you have planned. But you will never, never expect my forgiveness or sympathy. Do you understand? You forfeited that the moment you started treating our vows like they were meaningless. Rowan sat there, speechless, seemingly struggling to find words that wouldn't materialize. Diane placed the paperwork on the table, nodding slightly. The decision is yours, Mr. Davies, she stated calmly, the text on the document suddenly looming large. You can resist further or accept these very fair terms, allowing Mrs. Davies the closure she needs to move forward. The silence stretched out, the tension palpable as I observed the emotions crossing his face. Defiance, shame, reluctant acceptance. Finally, with a resigned sigh, he grabbed the pen and signed his name on the dotted line, sealing our divorce as inevitable. Our eyes met briefly, and I couldn't help but let a faint smile of satisfaction touch my lips at his subdued demeanor. You won't hear from me again, he muttered tightly, but I hope you find the peace you deserve, Alara. You deserve better than the person I became. With those parting words, he turned and walked out of the room, each step heavy with the weight of his own failure. I watched him disappear down the corridor, exhaling slowly. It was finally over. The man who had once been my everything was now removed from my life like a malignant growth. I could finally close that painful chapter and start anew, shaping my future on my own terms, liberated from the poison of his betrayal. Diane placed a comforting hand on my shoulder, her usually sharp smile softened by genuine warmth. You did it, she whispered. You've reclaimed your strength and dignity. I've never seen someone rise from adversity like you. Returning her smile, I glimpsed a future filled with promise and opportunity. This is just the beginning, I affirmed firmly. My journey starts anew from here. 6 months after Rowan's bitter exit from my life, the ink had dried on our divorce settlement. Thanks to Diane's relentless legal efforts, I emerged from the wreckage of my marriage with the majority of our shared assets, including the family home where I could rebuild. As part of the agreement, Rowan was legally barred from any attempt to contact me, a condition he likely wouldn't have challenged anyway. Last I heard, he had retreated to lick his wounds in quiet shame, his reputation in tatters after our public and tumultuous split. I couldn't say I took pleasure in witnessing his downfall. My focus was now squarely on myself, on embracing the fresh opportunities unfolding before me. Still, there was a sense of closure in knowing the man who sought to dismantle me had faced his own reckoning. The media had voraciously dissected every facet of our divorce saga, casting me as the resilient wife who outlasted her unfaithful husband. A narrative that, while somewhat sensationalized, brought a bitter sense of vindication. It was an unexpected role, yet one I accepted with a wry sense of gallows humor. After enduring the turmoil caused by Rowan, I refused to remain a victim. My future would be defined by strength, resilience, and the determination to forge something positive from the ashes he left behind. Nearly 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I hosted a private gala at the Westbridge Hotel's ballroom, the very place where Marcella's downfall had unfolded months earlier. The room was adorned with towering centerpieces of fresh roses, and a string quartet set a refined ambiance. This time, there were no scandals or affairs to overshadow the event. Instead, the city's elite and affluent gathered for the inaugural fundraiser of Alara's Light, my namesake foundation dedicated to empowering women who had survived the trauma of infidelity and emerged stronger. During my speech that evening, applause thundered through the ballroom as I outlined the foundation's mission to provide counseling, legal support, and financial aid to women navigating divorce. A significant portion of the settlement I had secured from Rowan would kickstart crucial initiatives for Alara's Light. No woman should ever feel powerless in the aftermath of betrayal, I declared from the podium, meeting the eyes of the captivated audience with newfound confidence. Through compassion and community, we can lift lives from despair and foster resilience, just as I found strength in my own journey. As the speech concluded, a line formed swiftly with supporters and potential donors eager to contribute to the cause. I greeted each person warmly, my heart swelling with pride and purpose. Who would have imagined that the poised, confident woman commanding attention and respect was the same shattered soul from just a year before, lying broken on her kitchen floor? The transformation was nothing short of miraculous, a testament to unwavering determination and the pursuit of justice. "Mrs. Davies," he said warmly as his turn arrived, his voice carrying a faint British accent, "I must commend you on such a worthy and impactful mission. Your story of overcoming such heartbreaking adversity is truly inspiring." His presence and words intrigued me. He was a handsome man in his early 40s with hazel eyes that held a glint of admiration. "You're very kind," I responded, intrigued by his polished demeanor and obvious charm. "Nigel Douglas," he introduced himself with a roguish smile. "A friend of Christopher Woodrow's, though I suspect our circles have diverged quite significantly since his unfortunate personal matters." I couldn't help but smile at his understated reference to the scandal that had rocked Christopher Woodrow's life and marriage. Nigel's choice to distance himself from the disgraced mogul was deliberate. "I'm a journalist," he continued, seeming encouraged by my amused expression. "But I've always had a passion for telling stories like yours, of courage, resilience, and the triumph of the human spirit." There was an undeniable spark between us as our eyes met, a connection that felt unexpectedly charged and magnetic. "Well, Mr. Douglas," I replied, extending my hand with a playful smile, "if you're truly moved by those stories, perhaps we could discuss mine more intimately over a drink sometime soon." He took my hand with a firm, warm grip, holding it just a bit longer than necessary, his hazel eyes sparkling with intrigue and something more. "I would be honored, Mrs. Davies," he said, his voice tinged with genuine interest. As I watched him disappear into the sparkling crowd of socialites, a giddy excitement surged within me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. It was the thrill of new possibilities and a future liberated from the pain of the past. Rowan's betrayal had almost broken me, but through sheer determination, I had transformed that devastation into a resounding victory. This evening, beneath the glittering chandeliers of Westbridge Hotel, marked the beginning of a new chapter, a testament to my resilience and newfound strength. No longer a victim, but a triumphant survivor, I was ready to forge my future